Those of you who are gay but married the opposite sex anyway, how'd it go? Are you still together? Did you come out? Spouses, did you know? My mother and father met in Key West, on Houseboat Row. My dad lived with a boyfriend and they befriended my mom and my half-brother, 13 at the time, who lived with an asshole abusive drunk. They convinced her to leave him and the four of them moved into another houseboat. The boyfriend ended up splitting, and my mom and dad mutually decided to marry, settle into a house of their own and be a real family, back in the 80s. My mom really wanted a stable, bring home the bacon kind of guy. My dad loved my mom, brother and really wanted a baby. But, as my mom enjoyed reminding me, sex was not easy and I'm a miracle, because it only happened once. The HIV crisis reached a head, and they decided to be tested. Fortunately, my mother was negative. Unfortunately, my father was not. They made it through 2 increasingly strained years of being a married couple after I was born, and separated. I grew up spending time in both households, and found my father's preferable. My mom went back to living with abusive drunks, but my dad stayed in the closet and single so I would never be embarrassed or experience discrimination. I didn't know he had HIV until I was 12, and it progressed to AIDS and started to be sick all the time, losing weight, sleeping a lot. I had blood tests what felt like all the time growing up, but I've remained HIV negative. They were really close friends throughout my childhood. My mom wanted a divorce, but my dad refused simple proceedings, so she couldn't marry one of those loathsome scumbags. My mom gave me her beautiful engagement and wedding ring set at 18. My dad always looked out for her, was always her safe haven, shoulder to cry on. He loved her in the most pure sense of the word. My father passed away when I was 21. My mother's health went steadily downhill after leaving my dad, and she picked up every addiction her boyfriends could introduce her to: painkillers, cheap liqueur, whatever was on hand. My mother passed 2 years after my dad, when I was 23, 5 days after my son was born. I named him after both of them. My ex-husband is gay, and yes, I knew. It was a difficult situation because he was really deeply in the closet and would not admit that he was gay, even to himself. He kept saying that he was bisexual, but his gay porn collection grew and our sex life died. We were together for 10 years. Since he wouldn't admit it, I wasn't able to confide in my friends about the issues I was having with his sexuality and get advice. When I finally asked for a divorce, some of our friends were assholes to me about it because no one knew he was gay. He eventually wound up coming to terms with being gay, met a nice guy, and bought a house and some yappy dogs. His parents are really uncomfortable with his orientation, but his partner's parents have been extremely welcoming. We are still good friends and talk often. I try not to dwell on all the time I wasted in the relationship by keeping in mind that it's what led me to meeting the guy I'm married to now, who is awesome and definitely not gay. It was rough. I married my high school girlfriend who was also my best friend. I knew I was gay but also had a very religious upbringing. I was committed to my faith but was never comfortable lying about who I was. So I came out before I was married in my late teens. But it was with the understanding that I would commit myself to a heterosexual lifestyle and undergo conversion therapy. One of the final steps in my therapy was to step out on faith and get married. I was told the holiness of the vows I said would purify me and I would be straight. Long story short. Disillusionment. After a year of marriage, the world and reality came into focus. I got divorced. Ruined my best friendship, and all my friendships really. But now I'm a proud gay man in a loving LTR with the love of my life. A man, of course, that I regret nothing. My journey made me who I am. I feel wiser for it. Though I went through some very dark times, I feel it's made me much better of a person and I'm able to really appreciate myself and my life. My father is gay. My parents were married for approximately 3 years. They divorced shortly after my birth due to incompatibility. Basically they fought all the time. They'll get back to this. My mother has said that in hindsight, there were signs of his being gay, but at the time she was either in denial or blind to it. My father knew he was gay for as long as he can remember. He thought that by not indulging in his desires and living a normal life, he could basically bury his homosexuality so deep that it would go away. His own father was a homophobic, alcoholic, abusive father, and my father was the only son amongst the 5 children, so he felt a lot of pressure to be the perfect son. His attempts to lead a normal life resulted in him being, for lack of a better word, miserable. He was angry at the world and took it out on my mother because she was the closest person to him. After I was born and he slapped her while she was holding me, she kicked him out and files for divorce. I'm going to add here that after that incident I have never seen my father be physically violent towards anybody. He was never abusive towards me and was and still is an awesome dad. I truly feel that he was just so angry at himself and didn't know what to do about it. Not that it justifies his actions, but just know, he's an awesome dad. I was 5 years old when my father came out. I remember the day I found out like it was yesterday. My mother picked me up from school and took me out for ice cream. We sat in the car and she said we needed to talk. I thought I was in trouble. She was acting weird. Now I know how hard it must have been for her to figure out how to tell a 5-year-old, and that it was anxiety, worry, and nervousness. At the time I thought she was angry or sad. She just came right out and said, "Daddy is gay." I sat and drank my vanilla frappe, extra thick, for a minute in silence, her waiting for some sort of response. Then I burst into tears. She tried to comfort me and asked me if I knew what that meant. I didn't. I had no idea what gay was, but I knew about AIDS, HIV and cancer, and the seriousness in which she had said it made 5-year-old me think that she was saying Daddy was very sick and dying. I thought it was a disease. She told me that he was not sick, he was very healthy, but that instead of loving and marrying women, he loved men. Well, that was that. I wiped my tears, finished my frappe. I didn't give a rat's ass who my dad loved and wanted to be with, as long as I would still have him around. That's what's awesome about kids, they just don't give a fuck. They love without condition and judgment. The most pure love there is in the world. That I found out years later that my mother had talked to a lot of psychiatrists and therapists who told her not to tell me, that it could be damaging to my psyche. I don't know what their reasoning was, but I'm glad she didn't listen. I wouldn't have wanted my father to hide who he was from me, and I grew up much more open and accepting because of it. Plus, my dad has been with the same man since I was 9, I would have missed a pretty cool stepdad, too. Anyway, my mother and father are okay now. It complicated, I guess. They say that they can't stand each other, but they are quite amicable and see each other often. They love to give each other crap. Honestly, they remind me of a brother and sister, or possibly an old married couple with the constant bickering. For what it's worth, I am a 27-year-old, heterosexual female. TLDR dad's gay, he's pretty fucking awesome, mom didn't know. I'm a better person for having a dad like him. Fuck it, just read it. It's not that long.